right. You see, a couple of years ago I went to the doctor because I was having trouble swallowing food, okay? But you know what? I'll open the floor for you guys to throw your best and most creative dick jokes at me. Anyone?
You suck dick!
That's the one. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. No, so the doctor ran some tests, and he comes back and he says, Ryan, you have eosinophilic esophagitis. And I said, whew, not going to remember that name. But look where we are now. So, character development. And he said, you have two options. One, you go on medicine for the rest of your life. Every single day you take a pill, and every single month you fill out a prescription. And the pills are big. If you think you have trouble swallowing now, you idiot, wait until you see the pills, dumbass. Or, I'm paraphrasing, but that's like the gist of it, right? Or, he said, you can go on a 6-week exclusion diet, so we can figure out just what's wrong with you, and then alter your diet accordingly. And me and my mom were in the room together, and at the same time, we both thought, oh, it's a no-brainer. And I said, I'll take the medicine. And she said, you're doing the diet. And so, 6 weeks later, I lost all of my symptoms and gained this rockin' hot bod. You can laugh, that is funny. And so every 6 weeks, I would have to go into a clinic for a throat biopsy to make sure the diet was progressing as it should and everything was working out accordingly. So at the time of the story, it's about the 5th time I'd done it. And I walk into the clinic at 6:30 in the morning. And as soon as I walk in, the receptionist goes, Ryan, you've grown. So I've built rapport. And they put the wristband on me, and they bring me down to the waiting room. And the nurse comes in, and she takes my vitals and all that sort of stuff. And then she says, Ryan, I have to put an IV in you, but first I'm going to administer a numbing agent. Or in other words, she said, Ryan, I have a small, sharp needle to put in you, so to make sure that you don't feel it, I'm going to put a larger, sharper needle in you that you will feel. And I said, great. So she puts in the numbing agent, and just immediately, elbow to fingers, no sensation in my hand, at all. And then the anesthesiologist walks in, and he hands my mom a stack of papers that basically says, if something goes horribly wrong, please don't take legal action. And he explained to me how anesthesia works. And the gist of it was, if we give you too much, you die. And if we give you not enough, then you wake up during the procedure and choke on the camera that we stuck down your throat. So we're gonna try to find that balance for you. And I said, sign me up, but my mom had me covered because I was still a minor. And so while he's talking, a nurse wheels a wheelchair out in front of the room. And I'm thinking, what kind of little bitch do they take me for? Because I've done this a million times. All they do is they toss you your bag of saline and you walk to the operating room and they mess around with your throat for a little while. But he walks me outside and he points to the wheelchair and he says, please have a seat. And I said, I will. Not because you asked me to, because I wanted to. And he had 3 syringes in his breast pocket. And he says, Ryan, I'm gonna give you some happy juice. And that's the type of shit I like to hear. So he takes out one of the syringes and he bites the cap off of it, which I think is a really aggressive way to administer any kind of medicine, And so he's right here, right there, about to put it in my IV. And then he goes, whoops, wrong syringe. Which is not what I wanted to hear from my healthcare professional. So he takes out the 2nd syringe and he bites the cap off of that one and he puts the whole thing in my IV. And immediately, I lose all sensation in my legs. Just waist down, nothing. And I'm thinking, that's what the wheelchair's for. And then he takes out the 3rd syringe, and he bites the cap off of that one, and he goes, guess we're gonna eyeball this one. So he's doing a really poor job of reassuring me as the man in charge of keeping me alive, And he was about half of it in, and if it did anything, I couldn't tell you, there was no feeling there. And they wheeled me to the operating room. And the operating table's this high. It's pretty big table. And he says, can you get up? I was like, yeah, I can get up. And I stood up and my knees buckled and I fell down. And I said, little help. And so he and a nurse picked me up by the armpits and hoisted me onto the table. And I think it's important that you know that they hoisted me. That's the word I'm choosing. And so I'm on the operating table and they put the little mask on me. And I don't know if you guys have ever been under anesthesia. Anesthesia is the tits. I love it. Because right before you go to sleep, there's this little high of I can't control what's happening, and then you get knocked unconscious. It's wonderful. And so I'm enjoying my little high, right? And the nurse thinks I'm terrified. She's running her fingers through my hair like this and going, shh, 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 you'll be okay, shh, shh. And under normal circumstances, I'd been like, hey, don't. But guys, I was so high, so it was like no big deal to me. And then I fell asleep and they digged around in my throat for a little while, and I woke up in a different bed that I went to sleep in, which I think is an interesting phenomenon. And there was a male nurse staring intently at me, because as soon as my eyes started fluttering, he goes, "Hey, Ryan, you up? Are you awake, Ryan?" And I'm like, "Well, fucking I am now." And the thing about anesthesia is that once you wake up, like, you're not good to go. You're still super groggy. And for me, I had one man on my mind, and I wanted the whole world to know. That man is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So the nurse goes, "Is there anything I can get you? Do you need anything?" And I said, "You know, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson would get me a glass of water right about now." And he's like, "On it!" And he runs to the sink, and he fills up a glass of water, puts a straw in it. I'm missing, like, the straw's not going to my mouth, like, at all. Like, I just keep missing. I don't know where my body is in space right now. And then I do that for a couple of minutes, and I said, "You know, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson would get me a popsicle at about now." And he's like, "Be right back." And he runs to the freezer and gets me a popsicle, and he brings it back, so now I'm double fisting. I've got a glass of water in one hand and a popsicle in the other hand. And he lets me do that for a couple of minutes. And then he says, "All right, time to go." I also still couldn't feel my legs. That happy juice works wonders. So he puts me back in the wheelchair, and they wheel me out to the back exit, and he says, "Here's your stop." And I said, "No, it's not, because I can't walk." So he wheels me out to my mom's car and throws me in the passenger seat, and we drive home. And when we get home, my sister's awake, and she comes downstairs. She says, "Hey, Ryan, how are you doing? Was the procedure, like, everything went okay?" And I said, "You know, they call him The Rock, because if you throw him at a lake, he'll skip like 5 times. It's crazy." Hey guys, welcome. This is not a joke anymore. This is like the intro. That's pretty cool. Look at me segueing. Not well. The next one will be on Netflix. That's the title of it. That's not the truth, as far as I've been made aware. Really quick before we start, super special shout out. They're in the crowd right now. Bobby Danahay, August Taves, Daniel and Darian Sarfaraz, Jackson Postal, Christian Wilson. I'm not missing anyone, I don't think. David Geldzaller. I got everyone. They've done legitimately so much behind the scenes work, so much to help set this up. So I would say give them a hand. You guys already did, but here's the thing. They are so scared of applause. So if you could all just turn to that back table and wiggle your fingers at them, they would greatly appreciate it. Oh, look at that. That makes me so happy. Before we continue, I do want to set some ground rules, all right? This isn't a joke, this is a real thing. There's a psychological phenomenon. It's called the comedian-audience interaction. And it basically says that as soon as I step on this stage, you guys all give me the freedom to do and say whatever I want because, oh, he's just joking. And I shouldn't have that power. I don't think anyone should have that power. So tonight, we're throwing away the label comic. We're throwing away the label comedian. Because I'm neither of those things, okay? I'm a visionary. And you guys aren't just here to laugh tonight, you're here to learn. You're here to think, and you're here to cry. Not all of you, just you. I'm gonna be so mean to you tonight. In your really ugly shirt. Look at that, he's so red. So I did that Ancestry.com thing the other day, recently, I don't know, at some point. And my mom is all German and my dad is all Italian. My results came back and it said 65% Italian, which is surprising because I thought I was black. No, see, that joke's not funny. That's the comedian audience interaction. I just warned you guys about this. That one's on you, all of you. I had to pee the other day. I do that sometimes. And I walked into a public restroom, not because I sought one out, just that was all that was available to me where I was, you know? And there was this 5'6" guy from Myanmar there. How do I know he's from Myanmar? If you meet someone from Myanmar, you'll know. And he was standing 4 feet away from the urinal, his hand was leaning up against the wall, you know? He was really far away from the urinal. And the 2 consecutive thoughts that went through my head were, damn, he must have a huge dick. And wow, what the fuck was that? What am I thinking? And so I walked up to the urinal and I started, like doing my thing. I'm sure you are all familiar. And out of nowhere, this guy just lets loose the most intense, loud, and sexual moan I have ever heard in my life. It was like the ghosts of 1,000 people who died ejaculating were released from his belly all at once. And look, there's not a whole lot that gets to me anymore, I feel like I've done and seen a lot of things. That was really jarring. That was really frightening for me. And I don't think that's my fault. I feel like I have the ability, I feel like I should have the right to walk into a public restroom and not be afraid that an old Myanmaran man is going to jizz into my urinal. I don't think that's something I can be faulted for. And then he turns to me. His hand is still on the wall. He is still cool guy leaning, right? And he turns to me and he says, "How you doing?" And I said, "Good." I wasn't good, I was horrified. And more than that, I've never been made someone's bitch like that before. He just asserted his dominance all over me. If I saw that guy today and he asked for my wallet, I'm giving it to him. License and all. It's ridiculous. I'm also here tonight, I forgot to mention this in my intro, which sucks because I rehearsed this too. I'm gonna teach you guys some things tonight. I've learned a lot through this whole process of writing things, you know how that goes. And I'm gonna pass those little nuggets of wisdom on to you, some sort of comedian tips. So buckle in for those. And the reason I said that is because I have one right now. I'm gonna talk about segues. I think there's something really interesting about segues, the way some comedians can just flow from one bit to another completely effortlessly, even if the topics aren't related to each other. I can't do that. So, you know how homeless people want money? Here's a story about that. I was sitting in my car the other day, not the other day, this was a long time ago. I keep saying the other day, that's a comedian thing. We'll talk about that later. And I was sitting on the curb, and this guy walks up to my window, and he taps on it, and he goes like this. So I'm like, I can help with that. And I roll down my window, and he says, "Hey buddy, do you have the time?" I said, "Yeah, it's 2:50." He goes, "Cool, do you have any money?" And I was like, "Damn, you got me." And the thing was, I had $3 very openly laying in my center console, so I couldn't say I didn't have money. So I gave him the $3, and he goes, "You are kind, and you are decent, and you are a good person, and you are virtuous." And he goes on for longer than you think he would. And I was like, "Yeah, I kinda am." And at the end, it was longer than you thought it would go on for. And at the end of it, he says, "And do you know why you are all those things?" And I said, "No, but you're probably gonna tell me." And he says, "You are all of those things because you are white." Shit. We had a nice thing going where I pay you money and you compliment my character. And you ruined it. I was born in 2001, so I missed a lot of recorded history. Most of it, I would argue, actually. And I'm bummed about that. I actually really am, because a lot of cool stuff that happened before I was born. For example, anything Ozzy Osbourne did in the 80s. That man was wild. Now, I can't prove it, but I swear to God that every single day of that decade, he would wake up, swallow a handful of Vicodin, and let that day happen to him. Because he and Keith Richards, between the two of them, did more drugs than the rest of the world combined. After all of that, you gotta wonder how many brain cells this guy has left. I did the math, and much like Living Jackson 5 members, there's 4 of them. Ozzy Osbourne is most well known for biting the head off of a fucking bat on stage during a concert. We're gonna talk about that. Because the story behind it is there were 2 or 3 guys, a little group of guys, who had tickets to the Ozzy Osbourne concert, who also had a pet bat that they were trying to keep alive, Couldn't do that part. That was the hard part. And they were thinking, what do we do with this dead bat? And one of the guys says, "Why don't we bring it to the Ozzy Osbourne concert? He has a reputation for doing weird shit to animals." Which, what a reputation to have, right? And so they bring it to the concert, they snuck it into an Ozzy Osbourne concert, a dead bat. And in between songs, they threw it on stage. And Ozzy Osbourne saw it, and the thought that went through his head was, "That shit looks delectable." And that's not even my favorite thing he's done. I think one of his hidden gems is actually his 2013 performance of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" at a Cubs game. Most of you are thinking, Ozzy Osbourne was alive in 2013? Sort of. The lights are on, but nobody's home. And the reason this performance is so noteworthy is because it shows that the Venn diagram of people who do coke every day and people who live past 50 is not two separate circles. And if you watch it, which I highly recommend you do, you'll notice that it's the worst thing you've ever seen. And I don't know who thought it'd be a good idea to let that man perform in front of all those people, but what I'm more interested in is how his manager convinced him to do it. Because could you imagine asking Ozzy Osbourne to do anything? Like his manager walks up to him, says, "Yo, Ozzy, you want to perform at the Cubs game? Baseball, right?" And Ozzy Osbourne says, he's English, so, "Blimey, no, I don't want to do that. I don't even know what baseball is." And his manager goes, "Baseball, sport, the balls and the bats." And Ozzy Osbourne says, "There's gonna be fucking bats?" And now you're all wondering if I just told you all that stuff about Ozzy Osbourne is the setup to a pun, and yeah. Here's another little comedian shit for you. When a comedian wants to segue into a bit, but they don't have like a good joke to do it, they just call that topic weird. Like, weddings are weird, I went to a wedding the other day. Or the DMV is weird, I got my license renewed last week. Do you know what that is? That's lazy. That's lazy joke writing, and that's just lazy comedy. So if you see a comedian call something weird, call them out on it. If you are a comedian who calls things weird, you're bad at your job. I feel very strongly about this, okay? So, necrophilia is weird. I was at the morgue the other day. I'm just joking. Purely for the record, I think necrophilia is gross, and it's not something I ever want to partake in again. But what's weird to me is that necrophiliacs have standards, like they have tastes. I can get past wanting to have sex with a dead body. Don't hold that against me. What I don't understand is that a necrophiliac will look at a body and think, not hot enough. Know when it was hotter? 22 days ago, before the car crash. Or at least warmer, okay? The truth is, guys, I wrote a lot of jokes about necrophilia, like a ton, and I could just feel my mom being disappointed in me, so I had to scrap a lot of them. I do want to leave you with the thought that it's not technically necrophilia if they were alive when you started. Miss you, Grandma. Sorry, God, that one was as gross for me to say as it was for you guys to hear. Let's keep going. So, I work at King Soopers, which, if you've ever heard me tell a story, you know this shit is my bread and butter. And there are a lot of weird people that come into King Soopers. Just a couple of months ago, it was like mid-February, right? This lady comes in and she has no fewer than 10 2-liter bottles of lemonade. And so I start scanning them and she goes, "Hey, you only scanned 10, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's how this works." Which was good, because I cleaned you guys out. So I'm like, I gotta ask. So I said, just out of curiosity, what do you need all this lemonade for? And she goes, "To drink?" Like I was the asshole. And then she says, "Hey, do you have any more in the vat? Because you're out." And we did, but fuck if I was giving it to her. That was so mean. Who looks at 20 liters of lemonade and thinks, not enough? What kind of entrepreneurial little girls are pushing that much weight? It's not even lemonade stand season. It's February. It's cold as shit outside. Another thing, mess that sentence up. Let's start over. Every other week, without fail, there's a guy who will come in. It's not the same guy, but it's a type of guy. You know them when you see them. And they come in, and if you've ever been a cashier, you know that small talk's the name of the game. Hey, how are you doing? Did you find everything okay? What are your plans for tonight? I don't give a shit, I just have to ask. And this guy will walk in, and I'll ask him all my questions, and I'll say, "What are your plans for tonight?" And he'll go, "I just get high and jerk off." Which, I'm charging you $3 for asparagus. Are you really gonna offer me that information? Also, it's 5 p.m. Those two activities will not take you that long. No one's gonna admit to it, but masturbating doesn't take that long. It's like a detour on the way to the kitchen. I like that joke a lot too, thank you guys. There was the closest I've ever come to quitting King Soopers was actually just a couple of days ago. I was about to go on break, and this guy, I had to pass the bathroom to go to the break room, and this guy runs out of the bathroom, out of breath and sweaty, which is a red flag. And he runs up to me and he says, "Hey man, you got a mop and bucket?" Which is a loaded fucking question. And the only thing I could think to say to him was, "What did you do?" And I swear to God, this is what he did. He goes, "Man, I shit all over the floor." And like, look, there are a lot of things, like you wake up some days and you expect to hear things. Never once have I woken up and thought, yeah, I'll need a floor shitter today. So I call over another employee, my buddy Dalton, was the same job position. And I go, "Dude, do we have a mop and bucket?" And he turns to this guy and he says, "What did you do?" And the guy goes, "Look, I'm sorry. I think the toilet's clogged, but I gotta go. I'm super embarrassed. I'm so sorry." So he sprints out of the store. And me and Dalton walk into the bathroom, and as soon as you open the door, the stench just punches you in the face. And at the same time, we both go, "What the fuck?" And so we're walking over to the handicap stall where the crime had taken place. And it was like a movie scene, the way this unfolded in my eyes, because I walk over and there was just a trail of And in the bathroom is what looks like the remains of this guy's large intestine. Along with that are paper towels, which I should note, you cannot get in the handicap stall. You have to go to the paper towel dispenser, and then he had to put them in the toilet. And the third thing, and this is the one that got to me, were his boxers. Now look, I abide by the philosophy that should one shit one's pants, one's underwear becomes forfeit. I agree with that. But who in their right mind can come into the King Soopers bathroom and hudge such a devastating grumpy that they have to leave their boxers in the toilet? Sociopaths, that's who. At about this time, another employee walks in, and in the back, you can hear him go, "What the fuck?" And so now we're all just like standing in abject horror at this toilet bowl, which contains what looks like Logic's new album, right in the album sales. And so here's the thing, guys, is that me and Dalton have the same position, and that means that one of us is maintenance for that day. And I was lucky enough to not get maintenance that day. But there is not enough money in the store to pay me to clean up what was left there. And that was the closest I ever came to quitting. After that, I took a 30-minute break because I felt I had deserved it. One day, it was a separate day, it was like a cold, rainy Tuesday, you know the type, and I was pushing carts outside, and I walk inside, and over the loudspeaker, I hear, "Hey, can a CC go to a propane exchange outside?" And I'm like, that shit's for me. So I walk outside, and there is a dude standing against the propane cage smoking a blunt. And as soon as he sees me, he goes, "Oh shit, bro, there are these two guys smoking, they went that way." And I'm like, "Dude, I don't give a shit." I'm like, "What am I gonna do about it?" And he kind of gives me this look of approval, this look that basically says, "Yeah, I could sell drugs to this kid. That'll make sense in a second." Because after that, he turns to me and says, "You know, I get you weed, shrooms, acid, whatever you want. And when you've worked at King Soopers for as long as I have, you know that you always indulge those people." So I said, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, man, and even better, I'll come to you." So he's really establishing himself as like a strong candidate for America's next top drug dealer, you know? And we get to talking, and he says he just got in from Taos, New Mexico on the bus. And he got his phone stolen, so he had to go to Metro PCS to get a burner, which is some real drug dealer type shit. And he says he was waiting for his friends from Boulder to like come pick him up. So I'm wondering if this whole coming to me thing is like an option that's available to him, you know? It's also important to mention, this is not the guy that I was doing a propane exchange for. Like, the person who paid for a job to be done for them was waiting for me to do the job that I was being paid for. But I was talking to the drug guy, so he had to wait. And so this guy, he talks to me and he says, "You know, he's got a shipment of DMT in. I'll give you 14 grams for $1,100. I don't know if you guys know anything about the prices of DMT. That's a steal." I said, "No, I don't really have the money for it right now," which was a lie. I did. I just didn't want to spend it on DMT. Did I just tell you that to flex how much money I had? Look at my triceps and draw your own conclusions. That's what I was looking for. There we go. And so after that, like I did the propane exchange, and the guy before I left says, yo, get my number down. So I get his number down, but you need a name to save the number 2. So I asked for his name, and he says, Easy. And I say, Easy? And he goes, yeah, E-Z. And it wasn't that easy. I'm like, fuck, it was so easy. That was so cool. And after that, he turns to me and he goes, you know, normally I don't mess around with kids, but you got your hair cut short, you're working hard. I respect that. Those were his 2 criteria to sell drugs to a minor. Short hair and employed. I think you should know, his hair was long as hell, and the job he was doing, super illegal. And so I said, I gotta go back to work, and I turned away, and when I came back inside to put carts in, he wasn't there anymore. So what probably happened was his friends from Boulder came to pick him up. What I choose to believe is that he has been trapped in the spirit realm, and he can only come back every 10 years to sell drugs to kids. So the logical question after hearing that story is, did I text him? Yes, I did text him the next day. I texted him and I said, is this easy? And he said, who's asking? Like some real tough drug dealer type shit. And I said, it's Ryan from King Supers. And he said, oh, what up, bud? How are you? Like he didn't just offer me 14 grams of DMT 14 hours ago. And I said, oh, I'm good, just hanging out. What are you doing? And he goes, oh, I'm just chilling in Boulder. Man, my friends came to rescue me. We're chilling right now. And I'm like, that's super cool. And then he says, anyway, you need anything? And I said, no, not right now. And then he said, good looks, and never texted me again. Another time I was pushing carts, you may notice a pattern here. The way the store is laid out right here, let's do it from this side. There's like the front of the store, and then there's this side of the store, and that side of the store. And I like to go to that side of the store to play on my phone when I don't feel like working anymore. And I was pushing carts, and I walk over there, and there's a dude sitting on the curb with a blunt in one hand and an entire handle of vodka in the other hand. And I said, I'll be back. So I cleared up the lot, and I walked back over to him, and I'm like pretending to mess around with this cart so I can figure out a way to strike up a conversation. And he turns to me, and he goes, dude, I just got my first job. And I'm like, congratulations, where do you work? And he says, you know Anschutz Medical Campus? And I said, oh, as a doctor? Even though I knew goddamn well what his answer was going to be. And he said, no, I'm just the guy who brings the food to the patients. How much you make here? And I said, $10.40. And he goes, oh, I make 20. Like he was trying to prove he was better than me. Dude, you're getting twisted in a King Supers parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon. At best, we break even. He said, you should apply. I'm like, yeah, I'll definitely apply. I wasn't going to. And he says, there's some real honeys down at Anschutz. He said, you want names? Of course I want names. This is what I came here for. And he says, there's Sasha on the 2nd floor. She's real cute. You got Brittany on the 3rd floor. You two would get along. And then you've got Sandra on the 4th floor. She's smoking. Like he's expecting me to go down to Anschutz and run a train on the women who work there. Like Genghis Khan, but with consent. I don't... And so I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll hit him up. And so after that, we're talking for a minute. He's sipping his liquor a lot. And then he goes, it's fucked up how we treat felons in this country. I'm like, yeah, it is. I was kind of starting to talk about like disenfranchisement or like, punitive systems versus rehabilitative ones. That's just because that's how those conversations go, usually, And he says, because I'm a felon. And I was like, oh. And he said, but what I did wasn't even that big of a deal. And I'm like, well, what'd you do? Because people get convicted of felonies all the time for stuff like drug possession or like, being under the influence of drugs, whatever. And he says, man, I just beat the shit out of this guy. And I said, that sounds like a pretty fucking big deal to me. But he goes, but I've been clean for 30 years. I've gotten in trouble with the law once. That's how parole works. You're not allowed to get in trouble. You cannot continue beating the shit out of people, because then you'll go to jail, and for longer this time. And then he goes, yo man, you ever read National Geographic? I was like, yeah, actually I kind of like it. He goes, fuck National Geographic. I'm like, yeah, fuck National Geographic. I know why I hate it. Why do you hate it? And he goes, how these dumbass scientists supposed to tell me where the Earth is gonna be in 5,000 years, but they can't tell me what the weather's gonna be like in 3 weeks? And the answer to that question is because they're two completely different things. But what I said was, no, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, actually. And then he goes, and you ever heard of global warming? I'm like, I dabble. And he says, it still snows, doesn't it? And I'm like, shit, dude, we're speaking the same language right now. And he stands up, and at this point, his bottle's empty. And truthfully, it was probably like almost empty by the time, like when we had started talking. But that's no fun. In my mind, he was like chugging that handle of vodka like it was the end of the fucking world during our conversation. And he stands up, and he goes, all right, man, catch you later. As if we were going to have further interactions. Like we would see each other again. For my own safety, no. Absolutely not. And I was like, yeah, man, I'll talk to you later. And then he left. And there's not much more to that story. I just think that shit's ridiculous, and I wanted to share with all of you. I have got one more story for you guys, actually. This is my favorite story, so look at that. We're gonna end on a high note. This is the weirdest guy I've ever met at King Soopers. And like, I've been working there for a long time. I just told you guys about like some of the weirder people I met at King Soopers. Tops all of them. I'm talking this up too much. Anyway, this happened when I had first started working there. Like I was in my second week of working at King Soopers. And I just clocked in. And when you just clock in, you go and talk to your managers because they want you to do any number of things. From bagging to pushing carts, that's it. And I was walking over and there was like this, this customer, old guy, like eyeing me, right? And as soon as I start walking by him, he jumps in my way. Like surprisingly agile for what, like, he was old as shit, guys. And he looks me like all the way up and down, He settles on my name tag and he goes, Ryan. I said, yes, sir, how can I help you? He says, you still in school, Ryan? I'm like, no, actually, I just finished my sophomore year. I'll be a junior in the fall. And he goes, no. Are you still in school, Ryan? Like, enrolled? Yeah. And he goes, good. You better stay in school, Ryan, because education opens up a whole world of opportunity that you never knew existed. And so I'm like, thank you, mysterious old man. Before this interaction, truancy was my plan, but you've changed this lost boy's ways. I feel like I should describe him to you really quickly, which is that, like, he was shorter than I am, right? And you know how you go like this? Can you guys see my face right now, the lines on my forehead? Yeah, you know those things? He had them all the time. And when he spoke, which I did a little bit of impression, but when he spoke, it was kind of this, like, here, put it this way. When he spoke, you could tell that he was a hard R kind of guy. And so we had our interaction, and I went and talked to my managers, and they put me on carts. And when you're on carts for an hour. And you think most people will be able to get their shopping done in under an hour. This is called foreshadowing. Because when I come back in, who do I see but the old man, who I'm going to, who I will call John, because I never got his real name. And this time, John has a posse. And by posse, I mean 2 other people. One was a woman who, for purposes later in the story, I will describe as not a modern sex symbol. And 2 was another man who was likely of similar age, but in significantly better shape. And I walk, and John kind of hobbles over to me, and he goes, Ryan, when I was 18, I joined the Navy. Got in a real bad car accident, blew off my leg. That shit pissed me off. And I looked down, and I'm like, oh my God. He didn't have a leg. I mean, he did, but it was a prosthetic, like not a real leg, And I'm thinking, how did I miss this on our first interaction? And even worse than that, like he was talking to me as if we were going to have a conversation. What do I say to that? And so I think about it for a minute, and I go, well, why'd you join the Navy? And he says, man, I was young, real angry, thought I was invincible, had a real high sex drive, and he points to the woman he was with, and then back to me. So I'm in a sticky situation now, because I couldn't lie to him and be like, yo, bro, she's thicker than peanut butter in the fridge, give me some, like that. No, morally against it. I also couldn't tell him the truth of dude, that looks like if Danny DeVito had sex with a pack of cigarettes and then aged 100 years. Like, that was also not gonna work. In hindsight, what I should have said is that she looked like Marilyn Monroe, because that's not technically a lie. She just looks like what Marilyn Monroe looks like right now. I ended up settling on the whole, yeah. But now I'm like, this is even worse for me, because like, how do I continue talking to him? He had me covered though. He goes, my back hurts. And I said, would you like me to carry your groceries out to your car for you? 1, I'm a fantastic employee. 2, old people tip well. And the other guy with him speaks up and he goes, no, John, you don't need any help. And John goes, I just got back surgery. And the other guy's like, you old bastard, you can do it on... They're fighting, like, over me in the King Soopers checkout lane. And they're, like, bickering for a while. At the end of it, the other old man looks at me and he does, which means I wasn't getting tipped that day. But I'm thinking, at least this shit can't get weirder. And John says to me, Ryan, I turned 62 a couple days ago, and that caught me off guard because you look a day over 95. And he said, and I went to the doctor, which I thought was a good thing to do, given how he looked at the age that he claims to be. And the doctor told me, John, you gotta stop masturbating. Which is not what the 16-year-old bagging his groceries really wanted to hear. But here's the thing, guys, is that I know a lot of jokes. I know, like, most jokes, and I knew that this was a joke, and I wanted John to know that I knew this was a joke. So I had a lot of options. I had very little time. So what I chose was the worst option, which was to finish his joke for him. So, our interaction went a little something like this. John, you gotta stop masturbating. I said, why? John starts walking away. And I said, because I'm trying to examine you. And John goes, Ryan! And I'm like, old man! Never saw him again, but God, I hope he's still out there masturbating against his doctor's wishes. He's probably dead. All right, that's what I got for you guys. Thank you very much.